Let's look at my plan of action. My first step, I will include my PPE note template. Now, guys, remember, when you have read through your information, you have identified that there's an aircraft, hangar, and landing strip. Therefore, these are your different types of assets. Within your aircraft consists out of a framework, engine, and inspection costs. Therefore, you need to make use of a table to calculate each of the details in terms of these different elements. Okay, then my next step, I will refer back to the given information and I will start with my calculations by making use of a timeline as always. And then, extremely important, guys, once you have completed your calculations, or as you complete your calculations, you need to remember to transfer this to your note. Remember, the requirement indicates that you need to prepare the property, plant and equipment note. Therefore, if you do not transfer your calculations, they're not going to mark your calculations. Now, this is my part A, and I have already included my template. Remember, in terms of a template, leave sufficient lines open to be able to add calculations or additional descriptions. Then, in terms of my calculations, I've included my calculations heading and my timeline. Remember, the timeline is mine. I make use of this to prepare my calculations. Therefore, guys, it doesn't have to be up to scale. It doesn't have to be extremely neat. This is there for you. And then, important, I have identified in terms of my aircraft calculation that I have a framework, I have my engine, and my inspection costs. Now, let's refer back to our given information. Part A, guys, the first paragraph, background information only. Number 1, in terms of our aircraft. Framework and interior, note number 1.2. We have identified that they've indicated to us, initially we had 12 years useful life and a residual value of 350,000. And then they've indicated to us that there is a change as from 31 December 2018, and our useful life is now 15 years and our residual value 250,000. We have identified in terms of IS 8 that we need to take the new useful life into account in our current year as well as future years. Therefore, guys, on my timeline, I have indicated that my initial purchase date, guys, remember, June. However, I need to depreciate from 1 July 2013. Therefore, in terms of my framework, I know the cost is the 325,000. My residual value initially provided to me is the 350,000, and they've indicated to us on initial recognition 12 years useful life. Therefore, if I need to determine my depreciation, which is my accumulated depreciation, guys, for 20.17, remember, I need to prepare my 20.18 PPE. Therefore, I need this section's details on my timeline. Now, my accumulated depreciation will be my cost minus residual value divided by my initial 12 years times how many years. When you look at our timeline, guys, half a year for 20.13, 1, 2, 3, 4 years up until 20.17, therefore 4.5 years, and my accumulated depreciation is 1087500. Now, guys, I'm going to reference this my calculation 1. My calculation number 2, remember, I now need to calculate the depreciation for 20.18. Therefore, for 20.18, they've indicated to us at the end of 20.18, guys, when you look at my timeline, at the end of 20.18, my residual value is now 250,000. And as per IS 8, I need to take this into account in the current year. This will have an influence on my depreciation in my current year, on my profit and loss, guys. Therefore, we need to make use of our carrying amount at the end of 20.17, and this will be our cost minus accumulated depreciation. Cost minus accumulated depreciation, carrying amount 2162500 in 20.17. Therefore, my depreciation for 20.18, guys, will be the 2162500 minus my new residual value, which is our 250,000. This is my new residual value, divided by how many years? Guys, originally they've indicated to us 12 years. Now they indicate that this should be 15 years. Therefore, we need to add this additional 3 years. Therefore, divide by our remaining period, which is our original 12, minus the 4.5 years past, plus the 3 year. And this will be an amount of 182,143. And I'm going to indicate, guys, that this will be my calculation number 3. Immediately, I will transfer this to my table in terms of my aircraft. Remember, I will have to include my cost, which is the 3250000, my accumulated depreciation. Now, guys, you don't have to write this out. Remember, if you include your calculation and an abbreviation in your calculations, they will still mark abbreviations. Okay. And my accumulated depreciation, the 1087500. Guys, when you look at our calculations, identify I've transferred the accumulated depreciation, my carrying amount 2162500, and I need to transfer my depreciation. Therefore, carrying amount. I've transferred all of the details to save us some recording time, guys. This is pretty self-explanatory. When you look at this, my carrying amount, calculation 2, depreciation, calculation 3, and I've included a total. Now, guys, remember, in terms of totals, if you do not have time, just draft the total and transfer this to your note. Now, let's refer back to our given information. We are able to tick off our framework 1.2, 1.3, our engine. They indicate to us on initial recognition, they've estimated 40,000 hours. And then they indicate to us, these estimates were revised at each reporting date, and on 31 December 20.18, management estimated that the remaining useful life of the engine was 28,500 hours. Now let's first transfer this to our calculation. This is now our engine. Initially, they've indicated to us that we have 40,000 hours. I'm going to make use of green gas, 40,000 hours. This is in terms of my engine. Then they indicate to us, in terms of the given information, that we now have 28,500 flight hours at the end of 20.18. 28,500. Now, you agree with me, we need to determine our carrying amount at the end of 20.17 to be able to determine our depreciation for our current year. When we look at the given information, they indicate to us that by 31 December 20.17, the aircraft had flown 12,400 hours, while 2,500 hours were flown during the current year. Therefore, in our current year, 2,500 hours were flown. They indicate to us for This period, guys, from 20.13 up until end of 20.17, 12,500 hours. For 20.18 period, we have 2,500. Therefore, we need to determine what is the new value on 20.17 in terms of our remaining hours. And this will be the 28,500 plus our 2,500, and this is 31,000. Now, our first step, we need to determine our accumulated depreciation calculation for 20.17. Our cost in terms of the given scenario, guys, is the 2,750,000. 2,750,000. Divide this by the original 40,000 times 12,500. Remember, when you look at our timeline, guys, the 12,500 hours flown from 1 July 20.13 until end of 20.17. 12,500 or 400, guys? 12,400. Sorry, guys, this should be 12,400. You look at my calculation, 12,400. And this will be 852,500. Next step, we need to determine our depreciation for 20.18. But to be able to do this, we now need to calculate our carrying amount for 20.17. Why? Remember, a change in estimate. This will have an influence on our current year's depreciation as well as future. Our original amount, 2,750,000 minus our accumulated depreciation. And this will be 1,897,500. Our current year's depreciation, we now need to use our new remaining useful life, 31,000, and we need to calculate this based on the hours flown for 20.18, 2,500. Therefore, this will be the 1,897,500. Divide this by 31,000 times 2,500. And this will be 153024. Now, guys, we have completed our engine. We need to transfer this to our table. Again, I've transferred this. Pretty self-explanatory, guys. Cost, accumulated depreciation, carrying amount, and our current year's depreciation. And I have indicated my calculation numbers for my market to be able to follow. When we refer back to our given information, we are now able to tick off 1.3. Let's move on to 1.4, our inspection costs. They've indicated to us, guys, that they've performed the inspection on 1 July 20.16 at a cost of 550,000. Remember, useful life, 3 years. Then they indicate, guys, during March 20.18, a rock on the runway caused severe damage. Therefore, on 31 March 20.18, they had to incur 585,000 in terms of an inspection. Therefore, we need to identify, we need to take out the old inspection cost. We need to capitalize the new. Remember, this will be an addition in our PPE note. The old that we need to take out will be a disposal in our PPE note. And we need to remember number 3, our depreciation on our old as well as our new inspection costs. Therefore, again, guys, let's look at our timeline. You look at our timeline. Remember, inspection costs incurred. On the timeline, our first inspection occurred on 1 July 20.16. Therefore, guys, when you look at the timeline, we are able to identify that originally they have capitalized inspection costs, but thus have already been completely depreciated, therefore zero value. Okay, and then on 1 July 2016 incurred an inspection of 550,000. Our useful life is 3 years. They've indicated to us at the end of March 20.18. At the end, they had to incur inspection cost 585,000. Therefore, guys, I will immediately transfer this to my PPE note. I know that this is an addition of 585,000, and this is given. Then sorry guys, not the question. Then I need to calculate my accumulated depreciation for 20.17. We need to determine what is the depreciation on the old for the first 3 months, guys. When you look at the timeline, for the first 3 months, the depreciation on the old, and then the depreciation on the new for the remaining 9 months. And we need to take out our carrying amount of our inspection of the 550,000. Therefore, let's start with calculation number 7 at the bottom, guys. This is my inspection costs. Calculation 7. I know that first inspection 550,000. Divide this by 3 years, therefore 3 times 12. I prefer to work in months, guys. Times how many months? When you look at our timeline for 18 months, guys, this light blue section, 18 months times 18 months, and this will be an amount of 275,000. Next step, we need to determine what is the depreciation for the first 3 months of our year. Therefore, guys, calculation 8, 20.18. I'm going to indicate to myself that this is in terms of my old inspection costs, 550,000 divided by the 36 months times 3 months. And this will be an amount of 45833. Remember, this is in terms of my old. I now need to identify what is the carrying amount of my old. Why? Because I need to take this out. And this will be the original or the first inspection cost minus 275,000. Calculation 7 minus 45833. Calculation 8. And this will be an amount of 229,167. Okay, so immediately I'm going to transfer this amount to my PPE note, the disposal. 229,167. Guys, this was calculation number 9. Next step, calculation 10. My depreciation for 20.18 on my new inspection costs 585,000 divided by 36 times 9 months, and this is 146,250. And we can now transfer all of this to our table. Again, I've transferred everything, guys. Accumulated depreciation, calculation 7. Calculate my carrying amount, transfer depreciation, calculation 8. And this relates to my old inspection costs, my new inspection costs, calculation number 10. And I had to include the additions and the disposals. Remember, guys, you do not have to do this, but I prefer to do this because I want to indicate to you to be able to test your calculations at the end. And then our total at the end in terms of our inspection costs